So with what's been going on in the country the last few days and after Venupanima's very moving BBC, I was wondering what was speaking to my heart to share with you. And something came to mind of a story or reflection from one of the inmates from back in 2006 that I read recently, and it seemed to be quite pertinent to what's going on right now and how to work with our minds, so I thought to share that and some other thoughts. And he's labeled it the Ronco label maker. So he shares, when I was a young boy, my family purchased one of those old school label makers. Remember the one with the dial and the trigger where you dialed up each letter and then pressed the trigger to imprint the colored tape? The TV series Batman was popular then, and I decided to label everything in my room just like everything was labeled in the Batcave. I spent a good portion of a Saturday morning carefully printing out labels for everything in my room. Bat bed, bat dresser, bat desk, bat lamp, bat radio. My bat mom, of course, wasn't thrilled with my labeling. They'll leave marks on everything, and eventually made me peel them all off. My bat mom was much wiser than I gave her credit for being. We label things and people. It's what we do. It's how we learn about our world. When we are young and learning, we put labels on everything. Apple, dog, cat, mum, dad, good, bad. The problem arises when when we carry this labeling to extremes, limiting our experience and forming rigid preconceptions about our world and about our fellow sentient beings. I became a world-class labeler of people. I'd immediately label everyone I encountered. Pompous, boring, sexy, funny, angry, stupid, airhead. And once I slapped that label on you, it never came off. It would never change. That label dictated my interactions with you. If only I had a label maker here in prison. This is a label maker's paradise. The labels I could print up, murderer, bank robber, drug dealer, crackhead, criminally insane, child molester, and even terrorist. Here, everyone has a pretty negative label. Before I became a Buddhist, when I first arrived here, I spent weeks busily placing labels on people. And now, as I study the Dharma, trying to practice compassion for all sentient beings and developing bodhicitta, I've begun to realize how attached I am to my labels, how I become attached to people with good labels, funny, compassionate, sexy, and avoid those with bad labels, pompous, stupid, angry. Recently, as I was waiting to shop at a commissary, it's our Walmart, except we're not allowed to roam the aisles because we've been labeled dishonest, the adverse and limiting effects of my labeling hit me square in the face. Also waiting was one of the medical patients, a guy I recognized who lived on the 5th floor where the sickest patients usually live, those who are terminally ill. I could tell he wasn't feeling well because he was slumped over in his chair, leaning on an elbow, his eyes closed. Behind him stood, someone I labeled as a thug. And actually, I didn't even have to put a label on him. He had THUG actually tattooed on his arm. Everything about this guy, as far as I was concerned, exuded thuggery. The scowl on his face, his pants hanging down past his butt, his gold teeth, his constant singing of angry rap song lyrics. I had completely dismissed this person as bad. And as I watched, the patient said something to the thug, who leaned over close to hear what he said. He then placed his hand on the patient's forehead, feeling for a temperature. The thug leaned down and said something to the patient, took hold of the wheelchair and pushed his sick friend off towards the elevator. That simple act of placing his hand on the patient's forehead, the act of a parent caring for a sick child, touched me. How could a thug do such a loving and caring thing? I realized that no matter what label I place on a person, they are capable of good. Those labels we do automatically place on everyone narrows our perceptions of people, limits us from experiencing the whole person. Labels keep us from seeing the Buddha nature that's inside each of us. So being so accustomed to labeling people, I'm finding it difficult when I encounter someone new to not pull out my trusty old label maker. I've begun trying something Richard Gere does in his encounters with all sentient beings. He pauses and then generates the thought, I wish you happiness. That simple thought opens your mind up to that person, connects you with them. And if you are open and connected to people, you begin to understand their suffering and will begin to have compassion for them. So like my mum told me many years ago, I'm peeling off those labels and hoping that they won't leave any marks. I just found that beautiful. And in this political climate right now where things are quite fraught, labels are being thrown around in every which way. We might label, and it's not helpful. I think we can see that when we see the afflictions arising in us, when we give someone those labels or when we react to someone that we've already labeled. And this is where the distinction, I think, becomes in so important between the person and the action. We can say that an action is harmful, that an action is not so helpful, that an action is an outright abuse of human rights. But the person who does them, we can create some distance there within ourselves from labeling that person as bad, as terrible, as a monster. And in that way protect ourselves and them from the harmful effects of our anger. And also forming a social collective of anger that's causing this country to be so divided at the moment. I also wanted to share something, a thought that connected in with this from a reflection that someone sent in from the week 12 reflection of Safe 1B. So this is one of the first introductory courses of our distance education program. And after covering many, many topics actually in these 12 weeks, it ends on compassion in action. And one person reflected saying that within the teachings of trying to not see other beings as other, she remembered that in the Lakota language, that there's no term for friend. There is only one word for relative that's used for everyone. And that the closest word to friend, and there's differences between this word in male or female, but the meaning of both is closer than skin. And so she wrote that, so if I think of everyone as a relative, then I stop putting them into one of the roles that Venerable talks about in her books. They're not a friend, enemy, or stranger, but rather related to me. They by mere nature cannot be separated from me. After reading this, I just paused and thought, what would it feel like inside to feel that everyone was closer than skin to me? That's not my world right now, but it's something that I aspire to, and I think it would just dramatically change how I viewed the whole world, how I viewed every sentient being that I encountered with this close affection and intimacy, recognizing their wish to be happy and wish to be free from suffering that we all share. That if we look even just superficially on how we see everyone navigate their day from trying to eat food that they wish to have, to taking a rest, to going to the bathroom when they need to, just small choices throughout the whole day is because they want happiness and they don't want to suffer. And her reflection also brings up the idea of the four immeasurables as a way of living our daily lives that Venerable Children so beautifully taught this last retreat that will be on the web soon, about having friendliness as our way of just greeting all sentient beings. And when we see anyone suffering, to meet them with compassion. And that suffering can manifest in us seeing that their inner suffering has caused them to harm others. And that's the hardest moment to bring forth the compassion, but the moment where it's needed most so that we too don't get overcome by afflictions and anger and contribute to the pain. And reflecting on the big situation that we find ourselves in with a lot of suffering going on right now, I find it helpful with a lot of the aspirational prayers that we can make that really remind us of our potential in the bigger picture. And there's a couple of verses from Precious Garland I thought to end with. He says, "May I dissuade all at once all those beings of any world who intend to engage in any harm, in any negativity without doing them any harm." like the earth, water, wind, fire, medicinal herbs, and trees in the wilderness, may always freely be an object of enjoyment by all beings as they wish. So to have the skill to reach out and prevent any being from doing any harm without doing them any harm is a tall order. But with the practice that we're doing day by day, that's where we're heading, and we can take confidence in that.